Hello and welcome to the Timeshift. I'm Chris Hall, and this week we're reviewing the latest episode of Doctor Who entitled It Takes You Away. Ooh, now because this video is going to be a review of that aforementioned episode, this video is going to be spoiler heavy. So if you don't want this episode spoiled for you for whatever reason, it's best to switch this video off now to avoid any spoilers. Everything ready, everything good, let us dive headfirst into It Sometimes Takes You Away, follows from space. Meets Hercules. Ribbit, ribbit. And as always, before we get too far into this week's review, I want to know what you thought, the viewer, of this week's episode of Doctor Who. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section whichever website you're watching this on. I will get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of next week's video, or in a video all of its own. I'm particularly interested if you're have any kind of suggestions where this whole timeless child nonsense is going to end up going. I really don't think it's going to be a thing, but we'll discuss that in the overview towards the end of this video. But just first of all, I like to say with this episode, worst title for an episode probably ever. It's taken me nearly 7 attempts to do the opening link because each time I got the title wrong. And of course a couple times I was saying, hey, let's watch this week's episode instead of let's review it. This isn't a reaction channel. I don't do that stuff. I don't particularly like it. As for the episode itself, well, I've got to talk about the frog. I have to talk about the frog. You want me to talk about the frog, so I've got to talk about the frog. Because there's not really much else to talk about by the frog, because the frog's the only thing that's really worth talking about in this bloody episode. I don't know if I should be hopping mad at it, or whether or not my boredom was towed away the mere moment it appeared on screen. It's a moment in the episode which kind of defines it, and I think that's the litmus test as to whether or not you like this episode as a whole. I'm going to be blunt with you, pretty much everything up until that point, I was incredibly bored. There was which is surprising given how much is going on in this episode. There's a lot of things going on. You got the lost blind girl and her father going missing. You got the weird noise in the wood. You got this small pocket dimension. You got this dimension between dimensions. You got these lamp moth bitey monsters, and you got a guy who looks like Freddy Krueger's cousin who they don't talk about, this weird meat testicle monster man who of course is evil and tricksy, but no one seems to really figure that out, and all these things put together just make an episode which felt incredibly confusing. And then we end up getting to the stuff in the Stromboli dimension, this sentient universe which is alive and that and thing K, which just, oh my god. Look, I know that a lot of people don't like it when the Doctor's a little bit too knowing, but just having them explain it there and then the moment they appear in the universe would have suited me right down to the ground, because all I'm doing at that point is going, I think this universe is kind of like a honey trap kind of thing. It's trying to trap people who are in it into staying in it. And you can check my Twitter, because I think, no wait, I didn't put it in my Twitter. I put it on my notes. You might be able to see in my notes, I write down honey trap around there, because that's what I thought that universe was going to be. Turns out I was right, but we didn't find that out for another 5 minutes, because the Doctor had to try and tell us what the universe was, but didn't, using an analogy which doesn't really make sense to me, because then the analogy does it work or is it not? Does the universe has chicken pox? I mean, it's a sentient thing. Maybe it has got the chicken pox. Why is it alive and a thinking thing? It's a brain? Well, what is it? What's going on here? I don't get it. I really don't get it. Is it like an afterlife? Is it just a honey trap? Is it trying to steal people? I don't know. And even now I'm still not 100% sure. Even though I understand it completely, I don't understand what was going on. And then we get to the bit with a bloody frog, for goodness sake. Look, that moment, as soon as the frog appeared, I'm really torn on it. Either it's a great, fantastic moment, this almost Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy moment of strange, surreal, twisted, warped humour that kind of makes it go, yeah, that's the one remarkable, imaginative, interesting thing about the episode itself. Or alternatively, it's a colossal waste of everybody's bloody time, a twist that feels almost self-flagellating in a way, which borders on the sheer pretentious, and in a moment where a lot of viewers watching this, who were talking about this on social media, were really disappointed that the person that the Doctor saw wasn't someone from their life. As I've said time and time again, this universe is a honey trap. It traps people in it with a promise of seeing a loved one whom they've not seen in years, loved ones who have died or recently or years ago or whomever. And I'm really surprised that they didn't do that with the Doctor. I know that with this particular series they've wanted to get away from having back references to previous series of Doctor Who, to previous events and previous characters, and to a degree I'm fine with that. I might discuss that in a little bit more detail in the overview, but here and now I think just for the narrative it needed to be someone whom the Doctor knew, whom they saw, because the whole image of them being a frog, whilst it is quirky and weird and silly, it also, well, here's the thing, would that moment have really stuck out just as much had that final form of that universe just been a swirling mass of glowing energy? Well, that whole scene has stuck out in the way that it is, and how we're all talking about what a weird moment the frog bit was if it was just a glowing ball of CGI energy. I don't think it would do. If you take that bit away from it, the sheer disarming moment of seeing this strange frog puppet appearing and telling us it's the sentient mind of this universe, you take that away from it, there's not really much else. Hell, there's not much in this episode aside from that. It's an incredibly convoluted story that seems to almost bend over backwards to try and get us to this big epic moment. So much about the episode itself doesn't really work for me, both on the stylistic and in terms of a story perspective. I don't like to do the cinema sins, this thing doesn't make sense, this thing's a plot hole, this thing doesn't make sense kind of thing, because I think that's incredibly puerile, and more often than not the things that it's picking out are either things which don't make sense on paper but make sense in human nature, or alternatively, if they went the other way you wouldn't have a story. And even with all that said and done and my reservations with going down that route, yeah, here's the question. Why did that little girl's father just decide to bugger off to this alternate universe when his plan seemingly was to bring her over there in the first place? Like, by the sound of things, he was gone for, 4 days to go off to this mirror universe, and by the sounds of things, he'd probably have been there before, so maybe he went there in the first time to figure out what was going on, and hell, any father worth the salt would have gone, right, I found a universe where your mother's alive, come with me, or at least keeping it a surprise so that when they actually go over there, she doesn't really know what's going on. Why did he linger there for 4 days? That doesn't sound like something a loving father would really do, regardless of not whether or not he... Wow, that kind of has dark connotations. Maybe he doesn't really like his daughter all that much. I mean, he was willing to leave her there in the wilderness, in the wilds of Norway, without really much protection. Sure, he put some bear traps out there in case there's any bears lurking about, but anyone could have come along and broken into there. Or with all the boarded windows, was something that she did or something that he did? Because if it's something that he did, well, that's only going to lure people in to think something suspicious is going on, which is what happened with the Doctor. It feels really weird. I mean, why didn't he just take her there in the first place, or at least after he'd figured out what was going on there, rather than having a short holiday over there with him, because he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know that universe was going to collapse if it had too many people in it. And here's another thing. This universe collapsed if it had too many people from our dimension within it, right? So what was the universe planning to do when Hannah or Anna or whatever her name was came over? Was they were just going to let the universe collapse in on itself? Or was that alien entity still able to hold on to at least one other person before everything started to go pear-shaped? And of course, if this alien entity can create these portals here, there and everywhere, why didn't it create it to a person who was more intelligent or imaginative? Some great scientist or great artist, someone who could really divulge the information and the notions in the concepts of the universe that we have. Hell, they could have opened one up on Gallifrey, which still exists, despite the fact we tried to pretend as though it doesn't, because, I don't know, I suppose the Time War always goes on and never ends, because we need some kind of motivation and background and dark backstory for the Doctor, when, spoiler alert, we really do not, but whatever, that's a rant for another time. As a whole, this episode, I really don't know what to make about it. The vast majority of it was really boring, poorly paced, not that interesting, and the one bit of interesting weirdness that's within it, I'm really torn upon. It's either a great, silly little moment even of itself, or it's just so totally out of left field it defeats any potential emotional weight that it may have had otherwise. Anyway, that's enough raffling and waffling from me. Let's go into the performance section. I don't think we're going to be here for that long, but we'll see where we go with it. And now the performance section, where I talk about the performances of our cast of characters. Jodie Whittaker was fine. I think that she was robbed of a great moment towards the end of the episode where she could have talked about the beauty of the universe itself. I still can't get over the fact that the big thing of her blowing a kiss and looking sad in a tunnel just had to be done for a fucking frog and not one of her companions or a past companion. No, it had to be. It had to be for a frog. Bradley Walsh as Graham was fine. And if I'm going to be honest, I am starting to get really done with the whole him grieving plot angle. I know that in real life it takes people months, years to get over the loss of a loved one, but within the story itself there has to be a moment where he just has to move on from that. And this story is either him doing that, or alternatively that's going to be the thing that we always fall back on when we don't really have enough character within our story. Yaz was there. It's plainly obvious that she likes the Doctor. I really wish we'd just do something with that now, rather than doing the, ooh, does she like her or doesn't she like her? Ooh, what's going on here? Knowing wink to the audience and everybody on Twitter. No, really, can we just do something about that now? If we are going to go down the route still of having companions holding a torch for the Doctor, at least, can we just get it out there in the open? Maybe they're saving that for the series finale, which is next week. And Ryan was there. At this point, I've got used to the bad accent, so I can't really know what to do with it. Father Man, for the brief time he was in there, was there. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about the other characters. They were just there. Yeah, I knew the performance section this week was going to be short. So let's dive into the overview, where we have discussions of the story itself and the upcoming series finale. Oh dear. And so, the overview. What did I think of the episode as a whole? And as a whole, I'm incredibly mixed about it. This is probably the only episode that springs to mind, and I know that someone else can point me out another moment where it's come to an episode of Doctor Who where I've just been really mixed upon it. Well, to be honest, it's not really so much a matter of being mixed. I mean, it's just that moment. Everything else in the episode is just so forgettable or so convoluted that it just kind of fades off into white noise. It's only the weird talking frog bit that actually lands at all for me. And it's only then because it's just such a disarming moment that you just don't know how to react to it. Some people have taken to it like a duck to water, in this case a frog to water, and really embraced it as being a weird, quirky, silly moment, seeing it for what it is, seeing it as almost, like I say, this Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy-esque moment. But for other people, it's been the thing that pretty much killed the episode for them. Up until that point, they were kind of with the episode, at least enough to just turn around at the end of it and say it was filler, and just leave it at that and wait till next week's episode. But this is unearthed within them just a case of what the fuck was that? My genuine feeling from the moment they entered the mirror universe was that I was confused, befuddled, and just frustrated. And of course it had two climaxes. You had the climax when everyone's getting thrown out of the universe, and then the second climax when the Doctor briefly tells just how great the universe is that she comes from, which I really didn't like as a moment. It had to either be this big epic speech about just how fantastic the universe that she comes from is and all the wonder and beauty within it, good and bad, or alternatively, the only other thing that you could have added to give that moment more weight would have been if she had seen someone she missed, like Susan or Riversong or hell, even Adric. You know, just someone from the classic series, even if they're just CGI'd there, and you get someone to dub the voiceover for them. At least that would have had some kind of a weight to it. And I know that that's not what this series wanted to be. It's wanted to be a total fresh start. And given that pretty much the entirety of the Moffat run was very self-reflective, very much self-referential, I was kind of glad to hear that this series was going to kind of do away with that stuff, do less of the blatant fan service stuff and just give us interesting and fun episodes. But there's just been moments within this series where you just have to say, that had to be someone. That had to be Susan, or that had to be a Dalek, or that had to be the Master who was working in the background, or it had to be just anyone else from the classic series to kind of give that moment a little more weight to it. Like the Rosa Parks episode, what a great twist that would have been if it turned out that the space-time racist was actually the meddling monk, either after he had managed to escape medieval England, or alternatively a younger form of him who was more awful, or maybe it was a new incarnation of the Master, or a previous incarnation of him, or just some other Time Lord or time entity. That would have been interesting. Or maybe the people secretly running Kablam was a group of Cybermen who was promising to destroy the Kablam robots so that humanity could end up getting its jobs back, only to then be finding that Jeremy, or whatever his name was, got manipulated by it all. That could have been interesting, but no, all that stuff has been thrown aside. Which leads us to this year's finale. I don't know what to say about it. The whole Timeless Child story angle just hasn't been anything of anything. Now, you could put that down to those rumours that have been swirling along in the background that Chris Chibnall and the BBC have been having difficulties behind the scenes of this particular series. So maybe this whole story thread had more of an impact. It was more present through this series, and then because the BBC didn't like where the series was going, they decided to have him change the stories and edit them down and alter them so as that wasn't to be the case. I mean, I find it particularly weird that the first episode of this series ends on a cliffhanger which is very much reminiscent of the William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton era. Then after that we have nothing like that ever again. And from that moment on, pretty much every episode from then on just has really weak endings to it. So in my opinion, or my theory, maybe the BBC looked at these scripts and said, yeah, that's great and everything, but can we not have the episodes leading into one another? Can't they just be independent ones? And, I know that you're wanting to do this big storyline thing, but, it feels so 2006, so, you just throw the old reference in here and there if you think it's going to work, but, we don't do overarching storylines like this in Doctor Who. We'll have a computer screen saying, Afterlife or Promised Land, and someone talking about the Promised Land, then we'll cryptically show the Promised Land, and then at the end of the series we'll have the Promised Land. If you want to do your Timeless Child thing, you need to have everybody at least once in that particular series saying Timeless Child. Maybe that was the case, maybe not. It would explain why this year's series is the episodes in it have ended so skew with and kind of limply, but that's just a theory. A Hull's Variety Pack theory! Ugh. Yeah, I probably should have edited in effect there, but I just really can't be bothered. I'm kind of tired and hungry. So yeah, what did you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section whichever website you're watching this on, and I'll get back to you shortly. And be sure to like, fave and subscribe this video, and click the bell for more notifications when my videos are being released, and escape if they're not particularly good. And also let me know where you think the grand series finale is going. Who's that mysterious voice whom the Doctor knows? Is it going to be a classic character from this previous classic series making a great triumphant return? Or is it going to be a character whom we've never heard of, never seen before, but apparently the Doctor knows so well they can identify the voice from anywhere? We're not going to know who they are, but I'm sure they'll have a full 15,000 word entry on Wikipedia detailing their entire backstory via retcon and all the times they've been in the show that we haven't noticed because they've assumed some kind of ulterior form or something along those lines, because let's face it, that's probably how we're going to justify some random character thrown in at the last minute whom we don't know or can't identify, have no idea whom they're supposed to be, but we're going to pretend as though it's something big and significant, even though for us, the viewers, it's really not going to be. Maybe I'm cynical for thinking that, but, that's just the way to things. We'll see. I'm sure that when it comes to doing this series' review, it's going to be at least interesting to discuss the direction or lack thereof that this series has had in certain areas. I've liked it overall, but there's been a lot of stuff that I just haven't really liked or hasn't settled for me, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.